very important topic. We are excited to bring you an exciting webinar today. So this is turning food scraps into compost. So to begin, I'd love to start with a land acknowledgement. So while we all meet today on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to just acknowledge the indigenous peoples of all of the lands that we're currently on today. And we do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local indigenous peoples and their cultures. So from coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation peoples that call this nation home. So please join me in acknowledging the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can all, well, give me 2 seconds. Okay, acknowledging the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can, in our very special way, try to move forward in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So thank you very much. Perfect. So for those of us who are not familiar with Second Harvest, we are Canada's largest food rescue organization and an expert in perishable food recovery. Our dual mission is no waste, no hunger, and it is our commitment to the planet that is both environmental and community focused. We have an incredible 36-year history of rescuing unsold surplus food from across the food supply chain and redirecting that food to charities and non-for-profits to serve their in-need communities. So today our event is sponsored by GLAD. So thank you very much, GLAD, for your support and allowing us to have this webinar for you all today. Okay, so a few housekeeping rules before we start. The session is being recorded and we can share with you the recording after the workshop. So currently your video is off and your audio is muted, but we do welcome any input you may have. So comments, concerns, questions, I want to know about it. So please let us know in the chat. I will be monitoring that chat today and providing some support there as well. Okay, so before we all start, I'd love to get a read of the room to see how knowledgeable we are about this topic already. So if you could please take a few seconds for me to complete the first poll, that would be amazing. Perfect. Maybe give 10 more seconds. Please get that question answered there for me. That would be amazing. All right, 5 seconds, folks. Get those last minute inputs in there. Perfect. Thank you very much. And that poll. Great. Okay, so this will be the agenda for today. We will first introduce the avoidable crisis of food waste. We will then learn how to create our own home composting and vermicomposting systems from two amazing experts, Sunday Harrison and Kathy Nesbitt. We will then unpack the myths and get insider tips on how to maximize our compost. So without further delay, let's just jump right in. So in 2019, we invested in research to better understand the breadth of food loss and waste in Canada. And what we found was pretty shocking. So get this. We found that 58% of all of the food produced in Canada is lost or wasted, which amounts to 35.5 million metric tons, or the weight of 350,000 blue whales. Not only that, we found that 32% of that waste is perfectly good food. It's food that you and I would go to the grocery store and be completely happy to buy. And that equates to 11.2 million metric tons, or the weight of 90 CN towers. That's the amount of good food that's going to waste in Canada every single year. So unbelievable stuff, 100%. So there are many solutions to tackling food loss and waste, right? We could eat our leftovers. We could regrow our food scraps. We could, you could freeze or preserve your extra surplus food. There are many solutions that we can do to tackling food loss and waste. But one powerful way is to compost our food scraps. So in nature, there's also no such thing as waste. So apple cores, potato skins, clipped grass, old flowers, dropped leaves, paper towels, and even some paper plates can be composted. And the result is a rich natural fertilizer that can be used by many of our plants. And to show us how it's done, we have two amazing experts with us today. And to kick us off, we have our first speaker, Sunday Harrison. So Sunday is the founder and executive director of Green Thumbs Growing Kids, a community-based charitable organization that partners with schools to grow gardens on school grounds. She is an experienced gardener with a landscape architecture certificate from Ryerson University, a master's degree in environmental studies, and a graduate diploma in environmental and sustainable education from York University. Composting is near and dear to Sunday's heart, and learning about the world of biology in healthy soil is her lifelong passion. So I'm more than delighted to stop sharing my screen and pass it on to Kathy to get us going. So if you could unmute yourself, Sunday.
Hi, I'm Sunday Harrison. I'm so pleased to be joining you today to share compost tips and tricks. Are we good, Rose? You got me?
I got ya.
All right. Very cool. So there's people here from all over. We're pretty, oriented to downtown Toronto, but I think what I have to share today will work for pretty much anywhere you're coming from. Yeah, so let me jump into my presentation. Okay, so soil's alive, and that's not just poetry. That's actually seriously true. The amount of biology in our healthy soils is exactly what we need to grow healthy plants. And guess what? It also reduces waste. So I just wanted to share with you also a block print by my colleague Laura, who is a balcony gardener, and she drew this, she painted this graphic, or it's a wood block print, I guess, showing a worm with the 5 hearts. So we'll leave that for Kathy to expound on. But if you would like a copy of this print, it'll be you can check that out later from the slideshow. So what we'll go through in my portion is basic principles of composting outdoors. We'll look at a few different designs, and we'll look at the finished product. There's 2 main types of composting, and it is argued that one is composting and the other is primarily waste reduction. However, both have their place versus landfill or incineration, which are the worst ways to treat organic waste. And as Rose pointed out, that's where most of our organic waste is going right now. So the City of Toronto has a green bin program. It uses an anaerobic process. And this program takes organic waste to a large tank, and it goes through high heat decomposition. Anaerobic means bacteria that function without oxygen. So methane is produced from that process, and it's actually burned off, it's actually flared off and used for energy. So it actually helps to heat some homes nearby. So it's not the worst environmental, it's much worse to landfill or incinerate our waste. The green bin is definitely a good waste reduction approach. However, those of us who are sort of geeked out on compost really want to make our own. But it's good to understand how this process works. So after the waste has decomposed, it's called digestate. It's then mixed with lawn and garden waste, and that's from the brown bag collection, in a final aerobic process. So you do get aerobes into that soil, and it is ultimately bagged and sold to the consumer as compost. But, my feeling is, since the introduction of the green bin program, the City of Toronto no longer provides educational support for home and school composting. So that's why I'm here, and why I like to share, my tips and tricks to aerobic composting at home or in schools. That's where I think the best finished product comes from. And you'll never have too much. So this is one of my favorite systems. This system uses 3 cells. Each cell is about a cubic yard, and that's considered the optimal critical mass to get the process going. So when the active cell is full, it rests, and that allows worm action, and that promotes an increase in the fungal biomass part of that compost. So here you can see the active is in the center, the resting is on the left, and the finished is on the right. So we don't move the compost, we just move the signs. The principles are pretty straightforward. There's some science to it, but it's not brain science, but it is science, okay? So the principles are that you want to mix your browns and your greens. Everything in nature has a carbon nitrogen ratio. So you want to aim for the healthy compost, the healthy soil has a carbon nitrogen ratio of 25:1 to 30:1. So your browns are your leaves, your straw, your wood chips, high carbon materials. And the greens are your food waste and high nitrogen materials. So you want to balance this out. And one of the mistakes of first-time composters is they don't add enough brown. So remember to collect up your leaves in the fall so you have them to work with through the season. But it is rough. It's rough. So it depends on the ambient temperature to how much high-end materials you add versus how much carbon materials you add. And you have to get up close and personal, and know your bin and know your conditions, which are going to vary across the country and across the seasons, right? So your how-to, you're going to add your greens to the center of the pile. You're going to allow those greens to heat up. You want heat. That's where your aerobes get busy, okay? Then you're going to add browns to cover the greens, especially in the warm weather, because you want to reduce odor and pest appeal, right? So then you let that sit for a few days. You're going to come back with your next bunch of food waste, and you're going to mix the contents. You're going to homogenize that mix. The browns and the greens are all going to be mixed. Then you're going to dig a new hole for the greens and cover with browns, rinse and repeat. So you're aiming for aerobic microorganisms. And so you have to ensure that they have enough air and enough moisture, because they all need both. So like when you squeeze your compost, you should get a drop of water. It sort of should be the same amount of moisture as a wrung sponge. The time it will take, that's the other factor, the time it will take to produce finished compost is directly related to the temperature, both the temperatures you get in your bin and also the outside ambient temperature. So at this point, we'd like to know a little bit more about what brings you here. And Rose is going to throw up a little poll to check on your main reason for composting. Okay, well, I'm not surprised. Most of you can't choose, right? So that's fine. We are right up there with you. We can't choose. They're both good reasons to compost. Okay. So this is an example of, it's kind of an illustration of what I just walked us through. We're going to actually watch a little video. This is at Winchester Junior and Senior Public School. Mika here actually went to that school, through his elementary years, and learned to compost back then, and then had a job with us as our Indigenous program coordinator for the last year. So I will play this video. Normally, I wanted to say, normally the cafeteria waste comes to the garden, so there's a fresh food program in the school, like a full-on feeding program. So there's probably 30-40 kilograms a week of food waste coming into this garden when school is in session. And the students are involved in the composting operation.
Alrighty. And here's Mika with the best tool in the world for composting, is the garden fork.
Garden fork.
So first he's going to mix what's here from the last time we added. Basically mixing the greens and the browns. It's a bit of a workout, huh?
Always a bit of a workout.
At least it's not frozen anymore.
That's very true. It is
I
very.
don't see any steam rising though. Like, it's still not really hot, right?
It's still not really intensely warm.
Smells good though. So basically, Mika's digging a hole after mixing the greens and browns from the last dump. He's digging a hole for the fresh greens.
Alright. So after the hole is about halfway down, it's usually how far I go. And then I just toss them all in.
Right. And what have we got there? Like, we have vegetables.
There's vegetables,
fruits, eggshells.
Some carrot tops.
I think that was dill.
Was it dill?
Yeah.
Oh, there's an elastic band.
Yeah, there's always a bit of plastic or elastic, and that comes out in the final stage when we screen.
Yeah. But if I can catch it, I'll try to.
Sure. We're trying to avoid citrus in the bin because actually the oils on citrus peels are antibacterial, which is why it's a cleaning product.
Speaking of that, lemon.
Okay, how about just
toss
it back in there, and you try to avoid the citrus. Sometimes that's a problem when it's a school-based feeding program, is that they have a lot of citrus fruits. So Mika put the greens.
Yeah, I put the greens in, and now I'm taking some of the extra stuff and I'm just covering it all back up. Just so basically the new greens that we just put in there, usually when it heats up and the compost is warm, that when I put a layer back over top of it, it helps start cooking it again, which helps the bacteria process start building.
Yep.
And it starts helping break down all of the food waste. And then the worms, that's when the worms come in and they start eating it, and then they start pooping it out. And that's how we get our compost, which fertilizes the whole garden.
Oh my goodness. I can't wait. Spring is almost here.
And
look at all that space just waiting for cultivation. And we just another note on the bin. It is in contact with the earth below, so that allows the worms to come up.
Yeah, there's this kicker, but underneath it's just all like I can go like this and I can dig underneath it.
Look how good that soil is.
Oh yeah, that soil is amazing, right? The soil is so nice with all the extra, with all the
yeah, it's still pretty brown.
It's still pretty brown.
So yeah, so we're looking at roughly 60% greens.
Yeah.
Especially late winter when it's cold,
late
right?
winter when it's cold, we look at about 60 green, 40% browns.
Right. And what are some of the other browns? Like if people don't have straw, which we're lucky enough to have,
well, if
what else can they use?
Straw, we also have here, we didn't have straw for some of the winter. So I had to find a whole bunch of leaves that fell. And leaves make just as good of a brown as straw does.
For sure.
And it's all natural. It all comes from the trees. So it helps with the compost and it helps keeping it brown.
Awesome.
Yeah. And sometimes I even find that leaves decompose a bit quicker
than the straw.
Than the straw, for sure.
So I think a diversity of inputs is what we're looking for.
Oh, yeah.
But with the greens and the browns, we want multiple sources of carbon and nitrogen in the bin so that the biology is also diverse.
Yeah,
right? So you've got all kinds of different...
I even have leaves still in this that haven't composted yet. And all different types of it makes it just... I think it helps oxidize it a bit better too.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah, I think the problem with sometimes with leaves is they could clump up.
Yeah,
so you have to make sure that they're like worked into the greens.
Yeah.
So lots of people kind of mix them in advance and then add that mix to the bin so that they get a really good, air spaces, because it's all about air.
Yeah, airflow,
water, temperature, and greens and browns.
And honestly, also, if you're gonna use leaves, we were going to take a leaf or a weed whacker and break them up and make them smaller pieces of leaves instead of using the full leaf.
Right.
Just so it helps. It helps separate it more.
Yeah. You can even, if you don't have a weed whacker, you can even put them in a garbage bag and stomp on it in the fall.
Anything just to help break them up a bit more so it can be spread out evenly.
But straw is wonderful if you can get it. It does add air spaces and good carbon to the bin.
Yeah, so that was Mika composting. He kept that bin going all winter, and there were times that it did get quite warm, but then it froze for a while. So, you got to work with what you got. So if you're interested in building your own, we built this bin using these plans for another school. There's a super, walks you right through it all PDF from FoodShare. And you can probably grab that off the slideshow later, or maybe Rose will put it in the chat. It's just a really excellent step-by-step. And it was actually developed for use in schools. So it was for high school shop to be able to build composters. So let's look at some other styles of compost bins. Pretty much everyone's familiar with the one on the left. It's very common. Sometimes it's in two parts. It's not quite a cubic yard in volume, but it will behave pretty much like what I've already described. You just have to, you kind of have to keep on top of the air and the moisture. Some people would drill holes along here to increase the airflow in this unit, and they're pretty good for rodent proof. And then you can sort of, the idea is you sort of harvest from the bottom there, which is like a cool idea. I don't, I've used them, but I prefer the 3-bin, but I know that this is good for, just a backyard style. The tumbler is another common method. It's actually in they have 2 compartments. So the volume overall is much smaller, but the turning makes it, kind of fun and interesting. And it is a good waste reduction method. It just will not produce, higher temperatures that will really kill weed seeds and pathogens. So as long as you kind of know that, it's going to take more time to produce a finished product. But again, it's rodent proof. And then there's like country style where, you've got your skids and you've got your pile, and the same thing is going to happen. Like your greens and your browns in roughly equal proportions is going to produce finished compost, and you got to turn it. You got to keep it moist. You probably have to water this because it's open to the air. But you're going to get the same results over time, but it's obviously not rodent proof. So a little more on greens and browns. You want to think wet, nitrogen rich, your fruit and vegetable scraps, your garden waste, your grass clippings, even your coffee grounds are very good there. They might look brown, but they're actually high in nitrogen. They're a good source of N for your bin. Eggshells are good. They're going to add calcium to your soil. Ultimately, what I found is that I prefer to bake them a little bit and then grind them in a coffee grinder so they get just to the stage of grit, and then that will be more bioavailable for your plants. Browns, you're thinking dry, carbon rich, twigs and sticks, dried grass, old leaves. If it was ever living, and it's now brown, it's a brown. Sawdust, hay and straw, shredded newspaper or just torn up, egg cartons, wood chips also. So in the food waste department, there's some yeses and some nos. Yes to the fruits and vegetables, etc. Yes to the tea bags, even in the bag. That's paper, it'll decompose. Rice and pasta, as long as there's no sauce, that's fine. What you want to avoid is the meat, fish, bones, dairy, cooked food, oils, and butter. You don't want those things. They would decompose over time, but they're also attracting animals. So that you really don't want them in a home compost. So send them to the green bin. So looking at temperature as the factor, very important factor. Some people call this hot composting, but it's only hot if it gets hot. So you want to get a compost thermometer and you want to know, these are organic regs. You want to know that your compost reached 131 Fahrenheit for 10 to 15 days, and you turned it 5 times. So the heat went down, went back up, it went down, it went back up. You can also look at higher temperatures for less time. That's fine. You don't want to go above 180 Fahrenheit, but you're probably not going to in this style of bin anyways. You want to take the temperature at the center of the pile. This compost thermometer has to have a stem long enough to get to the middle of your pile. If you can't get these temperatures, not to worry. Your compost is still going to finish, but keep in mind that weed seeds might remain. So if you know that you're not going to reach those temperatures, you're going to limit the weeds that you put in, and you got to think like the plant. It wants to make seed. So even if you put that flower, that dandelion in the compost, it might still produce a seed. So you don't even put like your flowering weed tops in your compost unless you're going to get these temperatures. So we're really looking at aerobic compost as the best quality plant food. And that's because there will be a diversity of organisms, and the healthy biology is going to mean you don't need chemistry from a bottle for your plants. It's going to be everything they need is going to be in that compost. And, you know, new research shows us that the soil microbes in the root zone are actually trading nutrients for sugars. They produce the sugar, they feed the soil, they feed the microbes in the soil, and the microbes go out and get what the plant wants. So the plant is in charge, and plants give up over half of their photosynthate, their sugars, to the microbes in the soil, right? Think about it. That's pretty amazing. That's the original giving economy, right? About the finished product, it should be crumbly. It should not look like there's any food waste still there. And it should smell good. It's pretty amazing that actually our nose tells us. Your nose is your guide. If it smells bad, don't use it. It's gone anaerobic. If it smells good, that's because there's microbes and they're connected to actually happiness receptors in our brains, and they're in healthy soil. Here's an image from the Soil Food Web, and this is Dr. Elaine Ingham's Soil Food Web school. Like, this image is, you know, easy to find, but that, you know, the Soil Food Web is something that she has so much work on in terms of the microscopy. And so what we're understanding now is that, like I said, the plant is in charge. The roots are are exuding the sugars, the extra sugars, to feed the microbes. And the level of organic matter in the soil totally matters, right? That's where your bacteria, your fungi, and then all these other creatures, some of whom you can see and some of whom you can't, most of whom you cannot see, are, you know, all eating each other's poo. And the net result is that nitrogen and other nutrients are more bioavailable to the plant. So that's the exchange that's going on. And then we go out up the food chain, out to the animals and the birds, and everything is going to come back to the soil. There's some fellow travelers that worms are going to come up. They'll come up when the temperatures are in their comfort zone, which is similar to our comfort zone, not too hot, not too cold. If you locate your bin on the earth, not on concrete, they will come up and they will help decompose your food. And Kathy's going to tell us lots more about how that actually works. You're going to see a lot of small insects. They're all fine. There's nothing in your outdoor compost bin that can hurt anyone or that's pathogenic. They actually eat the pathogens. So, you know, you're safer with the compost than without. If you see ants, that's an indication that your pile is too dry. So you're going to have to add some water. Now there's mice or rats. And if they can get in, they're going to look for warmth there in the winter. They don't share territory, so you only have one or the other. I'd rather have mice than rats, personally. So, you know, they're going to look for that. You might have to repair your bin. If you have the wood and wire bin, sometimes you have to repair it to keep them from coming in. If there's stray cats around, also fine. And then finally, we're just looking at screening our finished compost. The end stage is that, you know, it should smell good and not have any recognizable food waste. You're going to have sticks and such. You're just going to screen those out. So this screen is just made from hardware cloth stapled to a frame. It fits on top of a recycle bin. This is a real fun activity for kids. Like, they just scrape the compost through the screen and they save the worms, put them back in the active bin, the sticks and so on goes back in the bin because it's covered in bacteria. You're just going to put it through the process again, right? And then you've got this beautiful fine product that you can apply either as a top dressing to your plants or in the hole when you're transplanting. You cannot use too much. You cannot over apply it unless you're growing nasturtiums because they like poor soil. So there's always an exception. So that's pretty much what I have for you today. And I'm excited to entertain your questions and maybe learn something new myself. There's always something new to learn about composting. It's just a fascinating subject. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Kath. Sunday, for that. My goodness, I feel like I learned so much and I'm like ready. I'm ready to go composting. But I want to welcome our next speaker who will also share with us another way to compost food. So let me introduce you to the amazing Kathy Nesbitt. So Kathy Nesbitt is an eco-entrepreneur, and she has received more than a dozen environmental and green business awards since launching her business, Kathy Crowley's Composter, in 2002. She has been a featured guest on CBC TV, radio TV, CTTV, global TV, every TV that you can think of probably, in addition to being the subject of articles in the Globe and Mail and Edible Toronto. Kathy is a worm advocate, and Laughter Wellness is her latest offering. So she's very passionate about helping people live a more sustainable and joy-filled life. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen one more time and I'll pass it on to Kathy to get us started. Over to you, Kathy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Rose, for that introduction. And thank you, Second Harvest, for inviting me to come and speak Sunday. So awesome. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. And it's a great launching off spot. So composting is usually done outside, unless you have that kind of place where you have space inside. No, nobody does it inside. Worm composting or vermicomposting is done inside. And so I'm happy to jump off from Sunday's presentation to talk about vermicomposting. It is the 19th anniversary of my Great Green Enterprise and selling worms by the pound. Whew. Okay, so where can I go? I actually wanted to just talk about the green bin for a second. Like, the green bin is a way. It does still require a whack of dough to manage that whole program. It's an industrial process. So, the truck has to come. We have to make containers. There's 2 bins, one for inside the house, one for outside, a lot of plastic, a lot of transport of all of that material. And we're depending on user knowing what to do, right? We know that the recycling bin is very contaminated. The green bin is almost even worse because people put in stuff that is really, really toxic. Okay, so composting is a much better way. The long and short of that is. So, so just like outdoor composting, the worms require a carbon-nitrogen mix. Sunday went into a great amount of detail about the browns and greens, so I won't bother being laborious about that. Although I want to talk about the type of worm. So there are thousands of types of worms that you can, or thousands of types of worms, only 4 that are optimum for vermicomposting. And I'll talk about those for a moment. So red wigglers, European night crawlers, African night crawlers, and perionyx are the 4 types that have been identified, probably others. We're looking for surface dwellers. If you've seen worms after a rain and they come out and they're on the sidewalk, those are likely, if you're in Canada, Canadian night crawlers or dew worms, the bait worms. So I'm going to talk about the nightcrawler and red wiggler for a moment. The nightcrawler lives below the frost line and then comes up at night to draw their food down into their burrow. The red wiggler only goes 4 to 6 inches, making them ideal to live in a container in our house or school, business, wherever we need to have worms. And they have a different diet. They eat different things. So the night crawlers require carbon. So the shredded leaves, paper, whatever you've got in your garden, probably not paper unless it's blowing around. And the red wigglers require both carbon and nitrogen. So the carbon, the shredded paper, leaf, straw, cardboard, or the nitrogen is your food scraps. So that's kind of the main difference between the two worms. I'm going to show you actually a picture of a pound of red wiggler worms. You ready? These are my hands. Here we go. I'm the show, by the way. Okay, so this is a picture of a pound of red wiggler worms. 800 to 1,000 red wiggler worms in a pound. It's a lot of love. And Sunday showed a beautiful photo or picture at the beginning of a worm with 5 hearts. They do have 5 hearts each. Can you imagine? So 800 to 1,000 worms in a pound, 5 hearts each, 4,000 to 5,000 hearts in a pound of worms. It's a lot of love. It's a great Valentine's gift too. You can keep that in mind for next year. Fun. And I really think that the idea that they have all those hearts, words are energy. So that they have all those hearts, I think really helps people to love them a little bit more. And a little bit about me, you know, when I started my business, well, before starting my business, I was afraid of worms. And not that I thought they would harm me, just that they were gross or icky. I didn't want them in my house, for sure not. And so I understand when people say to me, I don't want to have them in my house or whatever about worms. I can say, you know, they have 5 hearts each. And then people kind of soften. 5 hearts each, 800 to 1,000 worms in a pound, 4,000 to 5,000 hearts. A pound of the worms, red wigglers eat about half their weight per day in food scraps. So if you had a pound of worms, half a pound per day or 3 to 4 pounds per week. It's pretty substantial when you think about the amount. If you live in an apartment, so the reason that I started my business was in 2002, the landfill for the Greater Toronto area closed. When the landfill for the largest city in a country closes, it's a problem, a big smelly problem. And nobody wants a new landfill in their backyard. So even though Canada is a pretty large country, second, I think, we couldn't find a place to site a new landfill. So we started shipping our garbage out of the country to the US. Can you imagine? Not just out of the city, out of the province, out of the country. Shame on us as Canadians for shipping our garbage out of the country. Double shame on the Americans for accepting our garbage for cash. Thank you for coming today, Americans. I'm sorry not to slight you. and it's not even a joke. I laugh because, you know, it keeps me sane. All right, and I'm a laughter teacher. You know, this was not a sustainable way. It is not a sustainable way. So I was like, I have a solution. This is an indoor solution. And I was like, I don't know if you've ever thought of something that was like, everybody needs what I have, but they don't want what I have. They need it, but they don't want it. So I launched my great green enterprise, Kathy's Curly Composters, 2002. And I was like, everybody needs worms. I learned while I was researching my business that a pound of worms, there's my family photo, a pound of worms and their descendants could transform a ton of organic waste in a year. And that the average Canadian family produces a ton of organic waste in a year. So I was like, wow, every family needs a pound of worms. And I'm just the one to put a pound of worms in every house. And then I started to do eco shows or home show, whatever I could do, wherever I could go to have a little table, I would have a table to raise awareness about this interesting thing, this thing that everybody needs, but they don't want. And then I realized, oh man, people are afraid of worms. And I was afraid of worms too before starting my business. And I was like, what am I going to do now? So I started to take on school workshops. So I do school workshops and then I was like, now I got to wait 20 years till they have buying power. I'm almost there. Next year. Yeah, so right, teaching the kids. And then my goal was to put a worm bin in every living space, every house, every apartment, every school, everywhere. So we don't even need the green bin, which my business is pre-green bin because we didn't have a green bin because we had a landfill. As long as we had a solution somewhere to put the garbage, we weren't looking for another solution. Once we started shipping our garbage out of the country, it was pretty costly, if you can imagine. Almost 200 garbage trucks every day making the trip to Michigan. I'll let that sit for a second. Yikes. So we were looking for a solution, and the City of Toronto, I don't know, somebody came up with the green bin. It's an okay thing. I mean, Sunday address, they are collecting the green energy, so that's good. It's not a complete waste, but it does cost a lot to create that green energy. When imagine, instead of trucking it around, we're all making some black gold. Anyway, so enough about that. I wanted to talk about how does this all work? Any container will do. Here we go on my own show. This container is not even available, but maybe to the right buyer. No, okay. So any container, you could use an old recycling bin or, whatever you've got is what you use. You need to create the right environment for the worms. So they need a carbon nitrogen mix. The carbon that we use is shredded paper, could be leaves, straw, cardboard, drink trays, egg cartons, any combination of those browns. The worms don't have teeth, so the more you chop up, and I believe this is also true for composting, the more you chop up your scraps, the more exposed surface, the faster it breaks down. It's less important outside because it's not as like inside. You want it to be a little bit faster and speed up the process for the worms. So the next ingredient that you need, a little bit of soil. I say about a liter, so everything's recycled. About a liter of soil. It's not milk. So just regular, there we go, just regular garden soil. I hope you can see it in the Zoom room. The worms don't have teeth, so there's little microorganisms in the soil that help to break down the soil. So what kind of soil do you put? Not purchased soil, because purchased soil is sterilized. If it's in a bag, it's been sterilized. There's no bugs. So you want to just go to a place, if you have a garden, you can just take some of that soil or somewhere that you know that no chemicals have been applied. Then just take about, a scoop of that. You're adding for the microbes, they don't have teeth, so that helps break down the food. Next ingredient is some crushed eggshells. Oh, there we go. You probably don't need to see the crushed eggshells, but there they are anyway. The worms, again, require the calcium. As Sunday said, if you bake them and then crush them up in a coffee grinder, that's great. You don't need to do that. The worms don't get cut by the eggshells. Some people, they don't eat the eggshells if they're not pulverized. And so you'll have that will be in the final product. You'll end up seeing crushed eggshells. And sometimes some people don't want to have that visual destruction. Okay, next ingredient is water, 2 liters of water. The worms are about 90% humidity, so they require a fairly moist environment, but they can't swim, or we call them fish. Okay, you can laugh at my lame jokes anytime. Mix everything together. So that's it, paper or whatever your bedding is, soil, eggshells, water, mix it all together. Before you add your worms in, you do a squeeze test, a few drops should come out. If no water comes out, add some more water. If it's really wet, add some more dry bedding. And then you want to just fluff it up once you get it the consistency you want. The worms like it moist and fluffy. And then you add your worms. And then when you're feeding the worms, you bury the food in the bedding. And I'm going to show you another container. So when you're feeding your worms, I'll just show you in this. When you're feeding your worms, you just pull back the bedding, add your chopped up food in the hole you've made, make sure that it's covered so you don't get fruit flies. And if you've ever had fruit flies, people are like, oh yeah, fruit flies, I don't want to have fruit flies. If you've ever had fruit flies and you have never had a worm bin in your house, you know the fruit flies don't come from the worm bin, they come from the food you're putting in the bin. And if you're doing composting outside and you get fruit flies, yippee, great. They're just decomposers. They're just helping break down the process, but you don't want them in the house. Or maybe you do, but most people don't. Okay, so what you can do, they come on the fruit flies. So anything that you don't generally wash before consuming, bananas, orange, you want to leave those out anyway, but your citrus, melon, pineapple, all of those things you don't generally wash first. Give it a quick rinse after you've got the peels, and then that will wash off the fruit fly eggs. Then when you're adding the material to your bin, you make sure that it's covered. It kind of, as Cindy was mentioning, you want to cover it for the odor. It kind of is like a carbon filter, if you've heard that term before, a carbon filter. So it helps mitigate the odor. And this is aerobic process, meaning with oxygen. So you use your nose. If it ever smells bad, it's become anaerobic. The worms breathe through their skin, but they breathe oxygen like we do. So if it smells bad, it's bad. That's right, Sunday. Right? So it's a built-in mechanism. If it ever smells bad, okay, action is required. Otherwise, your worms are going to be harmed. They can't breathe methane. No, and we can't either. Perfect. So in a regular bin, just any bin, once your worms have converted all the material, it's maybe 3 to 5 months, depending on many factors: temperature, moisture, airflow, particle size. The worms convert all the material, then it's time to harvest. The easiest way to harvest, if you have just a regular bin, is the dump and sort method. So you would dump your material out on a plastic sheet. Hopefully you would have more than a lid full. You put it in small round piles. The worms are photosensitive or afraid of the light, so they go down into the piles. Then you just scoop off the top, scoop around the sides. The worms will make their way down into the pile. The smaller the pile, the faster the harvest. Imagine if you just dumped your container out and you had a big mountain of compost. They just need to escape from the light. So they're just going to go down a little bit. It's going to take a very long time for you to harvest. So if you create little piles, your harvest is going to be much faster. You could also, if your material is quite wet, you could add a fan and that will help dry out, and that's also going to force the worms down into the bedding. So if you don't want to do manual harvesting, there are systems on the market that help to harvest. The worms will harvest themselves, and also helps to manage the moisture. And I wanted to show you one that's made right here in Ontario. It's called the Living Composter. I'm going to show you. Whoop, I hope it's not too glossy. Whoopee. There we go. I hope that's okay. Haha, beautiful. Made right here in Ontario. And I wanted to show you how this works. So it comes with 2 trays each. Here we go. Look at that. Holes in the bottom, holes in the top. And so when you're, once you're feeding your material, you've got your worms. I mean, this is dry, imagine. And you're feeding your material, you rotate around. It's about a month and a half. These are pretty shallow trays. So once your worms have converted, sorry, there's a big truck outside. When your tray fills up, then you take an empty tray and put it on top. The holes in the bottom need to be touching the bedding in the bottom. And then the worms will migrate up into the new bedding. You have your new bedding in the top material. The worms will migrate up through the holes, and then you're left with black gold. Can you help me, Rick? I wanted to show you my active worm bin. Oh my gosh, I hope this is so cute, so fun. Look at this. Okay. So this Living Composter is, I got my lovely assistant here. He's gonna help me. Maybe you can see that. There he is. Oh, here he is. Look at how cute he is. Handsome man. Yeah, so if you can hold that, can we bring it closer? Okay, so this is my active worm bin. Ooh, the big reveal. Okay, I'm gonna pull this back so you can see what's happening here. Uh-oh, I hope you can see. Oh, look at, okay, here, I'm gonna show you these guys. Okay, let me just see. This is not as easy as it looks. Here we go. Can you see that? Can you see the worms there? No?
Yes, so the worms.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so there we go. So this, you can't smell, but this really doesn't have any, it doesn't have an odor. It's very moist. Yeah, it's so beautiful. Okay, thank you, Nana. Okay, so let me just put it back here. Can you hold up this next one? Okay, so in the bottom, when you're adding the next tray on, oh, look at this. So you can see I've added some shredded paper in the center here. This was full when I added the next tray on, but the worms, they reduce the volume as they eat the material. The material gets smaller and the volume reduces. So it's not touching the holes anymore. They're no longer able to get up to the next level. So look at this. So you put, oh my gosh, look at this stuff. Wow, that is black gold. My plants are going to be so happy. They're just going to burst out of their shells. Okay, and I wanted to show you, okay, if you can put that back on there. Okay, thank you very much. You're a good man. That's true. Okay, let's see. That's why you have PowerPoint, because then you don't get worm poo on your hands. Okay, so I wanted to show you, oh, now my back's to that thing. Rose was talking about you could regrow things, and I saw in the chat somebody put in there. So I found this while I was looking. This is the butt of a romaine. So you see the 2 horns? That's new growth. So this I can plant in and that's going to grow another romaine lettuce. And what else was I, oh, I found, oh no, I got this all stirred up. Oh, I found another one, yes. So there's another bottom of a lettuce that's starting to germinate. I don't know if you can see that either. But so you can do that with your carrot tops, and potatoes start to grow, you know, if you get the eye. It's so beautiful. All right, so I think we're running out of time. All right, so that's kind of the end of my presentation. I lost my clock, okay. So there you go.
Amazing, Kathy. My goodness, I feel like there's so many worms in that bin, and they all look, oh, they're actually really cute. And I love worms myself. I used to kind of play with them a lot when I was younger. So I also get really excited when there's like a bunch of worms that I could handle and kind of manipulate. And they're such amazing additions and such helpers for soil. So kudos to the worms. Love it. Yeah, so we are coming up at the end of our workshop. So before we go on to the Q&A, just wanted to quickly say a huge thank you again to GLAD, who has sponsored our event. So thank you so much for allowing us to do this and have these two amazing speakers to talk about composting. So I feel like the Q&A questions and the chat was exploding with questions from folks. So we do have maybe a few minutes to maybe touch base with our speakers and share some of the questions, and hopefully, and I'm not hopefully, they will have amazing answers for us. So I'm gonna unmute both of our speakers, and this, perfect. Thank you so much, Kathy. And so, yeah, we have a lot. I've noted like 50 questions over at my end. So we can't get to all 50 of them. So maybe we can only get to a few. But the first question that I'd love to ask is from Sarah. And she asked, what if you just compost greens and not browns? What would happen?
It'd be really stinky. Go
Mm,
anaerobic and smell bad.
got it. Okay, so yeah, the browns really does help with the aeration a
It
little.
is a really common mistake. People compost without enough browns, and then you think, oh, this doesn't work, right? Because it doesn't. You got to have the browns.
Makes sense. And speaking of browns, do you have any suggestions, either Kathy or Sunday, of where folks can get access to hay or straw?
Yeah, if you go out of Toronto, if you're in the big city, where depending where you're located, if you go to any farms, they often have straw available. They'll have signs at the end of the gate.
It's also sold as bedding for rabbits and small, small animals. So you can sometimes get it from your local hardware store as well. You can just ask. It might be expensive and not come in a full bale, but depends how much you need. You know, that might be a good answer. Like basically litter, like rabbit litter is kind of what you're, that's another kind of option.
Nice. Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, I had another question about, could they use hamster beds as browns? And I guess we can.
Yeah, if it's basically clean sawdust or clean wood chips, it should be fine. It's just, again, particle size, which I didn't go into a whole lot, but it is pretty important because all the microbes are acting on all the surfaces, right? So the more surface area you have in both your greens and your browns, the faster everything's going to go.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, maybe I'll take one more question. And the question is from Neko. I believe that's how you say your name. I apologize, my friend, if I butchered your name, but I hope that is Neko. But do you have any suggestions for getting an open air pile compost bin to higher temperatures? Yeah, how do we get the
you want to get higher temperatures, you need more nitrogen rich materials. So more food waste, more chicken manure is high nitrogen, like animal manures are high nitrogen. Sometimes they're fairly mixed depending on how long the animal, if the manure includes the bedding that the animal was using, then it might be more balanced. But yeah, to get the higher temperatures, you need the higher end materials. So just keep in mind that you're going to monitor those temperatures. You don't want to go above 180 Fahrenheit. You want to stay below that, but you want to get above 131. 131 or above is going to kill off your pathogens and your weed seeds. So yeah, you just need you need a good compost thermometer to know what's going on.
Amazing. Okay, and then you know what? Maybe I'll ask one more question to Kathy. And the question here is, Kathy, where can they get amazing worms? How do we get hooked up to worms? What do we do?
I wish I could say I could help you. Usually, I know. Usually, from me, I would say, "Oh, you just get in touch, send me an email." During this cuckoo time, demand has been so high. We actually have a waiting list at the moment.
Mm.
So if you know anybody that has a worm bin, you can ask them if they would be so kind as to either sell you a small amount or give you a small amount, because they do have a phenomenal reproduction. So once you get worms and you nurture them, they're gonna flourish.
Can I jump in here too? Because Chanel wanted to know tips on apartment and balcony composting. Like, I have a worm composter that I use. I keep it outside in the warm weather, so it is an option. And then inside, obviously, you have to bring it in for the winter, but it really is a good option for apartment dwellers. And you can put it on the balcony. They don't like to freeze. They like the same temperatures we do. They don't like it too hot or too cold.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Round of applause for two amazing speakers. I've certainly learned a lot about composting, and I think I'm a little bit more equipped in handling my pile at the beginning of the garden season. So thank you so much, Sunday, and thank you so much, Kathy. Love that. Love that. Screenshot that for sure. So before we push off, I would love folks to complete the last poll of today's session for me. And we will also be kind of sharing the recordings of this webinar, and also in the thank you email, we will also be sharing contact information for both Kathy and Sunday. So if you have any questions that we didn't get to answering today, feel free to reach out to them and learn about the amazing things that they get to do. Composting and growing hobbies and businesses. So feel free to reach out to these two amazing speakers of ours for sure. So if you could take a few seconds before you log off today to complete that poll for me, that would be amazing. Amazing. Sweet. So on behalf of my team and also Sunday and Kathy, we want to thank everybody for joining us. We went a little bit late, but I feel like the information is worth it. So yes, thank you for joining us. Feel free to check out our website and follow us on our newsletters and social media platforms for additional upcoming webinars. We got you. There's 2 more coming up in June, or the end of May, beginning of June. So feel free to follow us along as we explore food. Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We are signing off from where I am to all of you, from beautiful Caledon to where you are. Hopefully it's beautiful to where you are as well. We'll see you in the next webinar. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great evening.